I'm Ross Mars from Pro Football Focus Fantasy. Welcome to the Fantasy Slam. The NFL draft is just around the corner, and Dynasty owners around the globe are taking stock of their rosters and starting to take a look at who's going to be cut, who they're going to keep around, and just exactly what they need. So, as an IDP gamer, it's a great opportunity to take stock of the IDP landscape. The most important position on any IDP roster is your linebacker core. So understanding who you've got, you want to keep, who you want to cut, and just exactly where you stand is really important. When I and other guys at PFF take stock of positions, we tend to put people in tiers. I find this is a really useful method of ranking Dynasty players because getting into the minutiae of, is this guy the number 1 overall, number 2 overall, number 3 overall, that can sort of lead to you, tripping over yourself. It's a much better strategy to kind of bunch players together in tiers. This guy is an elite LB1, these guys are, bottom end LB1s, put them in tiers. So without further ado, let's have a quick look at how we've got linebackers lined up at the minute. So we have 6 players currently in our tier 1 for linebackers, and I'm a little bit surprised to say that 4 of those players come from the 2012 draft class, namely Luke Kuechly, who's number 1, Lavonte David, number 2, Vontaze Burfict, undrafted in 2012 at number 5, and Bobby Wagner, another member of that class, at number 6. But somewhat more surprisingly, if we take a look at the 50 players we have ranked at the minute on our website, 10 of those players came from the 2012 draft class, which is a staggering number. So if you were an owner heading into 2012 looking for linebackers, you probably got fairly lucky. But let's touch on some of those tier 1 linebackers quickly. Generally, tier 1 linebackers have over 14% tackle frequencies, and you're looking at like 120 to 140 plus total tackles. For example, last year Luke Kuechly had 156 total tackles and a 16.4% tackle frequency, and that's why he's our number 1. I said there were 6 players in this top tier, and I've already mentioned 4 of them. The other 2, namely Navarro Bowman, who I would still consider an LB1 despite the injury. He's still someone who, at only 25 years of age, is someone who's going to be around playing for plenty of years. So he's still a tier 1 linebacker in my book. The other guy being Darryl Washington. Again, Washington's only 27, although he had a slightly disappointing 9.8% tackle frequency last year, partly because of struggled alongside Kyle Hansby, who's now out of the picture. I think he's going to bounce back to previous form where he's a 12 to 13 tackle frequency guy who makes plenty of big plays like sacks and interceptions. Let's drop down into tier 2 and take a focus on some of the names, namely Sean Lee, who is a somewhat surprising addition to tier 2. The reason he's dropped down a tier in our rankings of late is mainly because of his injury-prone nature. He's struggled to put 16 games together and stay on the field for a whole season. Despite the fact he's got a 14.7% tackle frequency, which puts him in that tier 1 bracket, just because you can't guarantee any player's going to play 16 games. But for me, Sean Lee, he's proving a little bit injury-prone, so I just want to knock him down a tier. Another player in the tier 2 band that is quite surprising to some is the Rams' second-year man, Alec Ogletree. Now, Ogletree as an outside linebacker did exceptionally well last year, recording an 11.9% tackle frequency. At only 22 years of age, he's got plenty of years in front of him, and he looks like he could still find more improvement. That makes him a top tier 2 player and someone who could take a step forward. Now let's drop down into tier 3, and there's a couple of players I think you might want to hit on. Another Ram, for example, James Laurinaitis. Laurinaitis has taken a real tumble in the last few seasons. His tackle frequency has remained around 11-12%, and he hasn't really taken that step forward, providing big turnovers such as interceptions, forced fumbles, sacks, at least not to the rate some of these higher ranked players are. So Laurinaitis, who was previously a tier 1 player, is definitely now bottom of tier 2 at best. We've got him in tier 3. Another player in this tier, who potentially people would argue would be higher, is Von Miller. Now, Von Miller is obviously a pass rush linebacker. He gets a lot of his points from his turnovers. But a question we're going to need to ask ourselves is, 1, how he's going to deal with his off-field issues. Is this going to continue to be an issue for him? Is he going to be able to get over this and keep on the straight and narrow and avoid suspensions? And 2, just how is he going to recover from his torn right ACL, which he suffered late in the year? It's debatable whether he's going to be ready for week 1 this season, so owners that have him might be taking stock and trying to ship him around. If you believe Von Miller's going to keep his nose clean and he's going to fully recover, I could definitely agree with you in seeing him moving him up a little bit from tier 3 into tier 2, and maybe making a play for this guy. I'm going to touch on a few players we have in our tier 4 rankings, which is linebacker 30 to linebacker 50. Now, I said there were several players from the 2012 draft class in here in these rankings, and namely we've got Zach Brown, Danny Trevathan, Audie Cole, Demario Davis and Dante Hightower. They all fit into this tier 4 bracket, so they've all got plenty of upside. They're all very young. Brown is 24, Cole is 24, so is Trevathan. So these are all really interesting players, I think, moving forward with potential to really step up. So if you've got these guys on your roster, you should definitely be pleased. A couple of other notable players in this section who all have upside, plenty of upside, would be players from last year's draft class. Namely Arthur Brown, who failed to see much time on the field last year, despite the retirement of Ray Lewis in Baltimore, but also potentially Kevin Minter and Barkevious Mingo. Minter's particularly of interest with the departure of Carlos Dansby from Arizona, so he's going to see some increased playing time, and he was definitely someone from last year's class that people were very keen on. And if you want to move towards those outside pass rushers who in big play scoring system, Barkevious Mingo not only has a fantastic name, but he's flashed some real ability off the edge. He could definitely be a riser this year in fantasy football. So that's, if you want to hear a little bit more about tiers and fantasy football and linebackers, please head over to the Pro Football Focus website, where we've got all this available to read for free on the website. I've been Ross Miles. Thanks for listening.